Hello, we are live. Happy Friday. Happy Friday, July 26th. Um, how is the audio? It looks good on my end. Could someone who's watching in the comments maybe tell me if the audio is good? We'll wait a few minutes before I get started on today's subject. Maybe let a few more people join. Audio sounds good. Thank you. Thank you, community guidelines. While we're waiting before I get started, I'll give a couple public service announcements. Yesterday, I had a nice day off. I've been working all the time lately. Work's just been getting crazier and crazier. And went with a coworker to Schlitterbahn in New Braunfels, Texas, a water park. It's a perfect day, perfect Texas day. And spent many hours sort of just floating around on rivers and falls, and it really wasn't that bad. I got burned. I don't know if you can see on camera. We're kind of red. So if you have pale white pink skin like me, then you gotta be wary of that. So the first public service announcement is aloe vera. I'm guessing if you have super pale skin like me, then you already know about aloe vera. But if it wasn't for aloe vera, then the sun would just be brutal. You just coat a gallon of aloe vera on your tender burnt skin, and everything works out good. Silver wound gel. I should probably try some super silver wound gel. That'd probably be pretty good. Public service announcement 2. This is something I've been telling all my friends because I think it's fascinating. I had a tooth issue in the back here for like a year. I've been lucky. I've had very little tooth problems in my life. I've been very lucky, and I don't go to the dentist. And every time I go to the dentist, which is I think the last time I went was like 10 years ago. Every time I do go, I get worried like it's going to be terrible, and it's usually not. It's usually just a cleaning, and it's all good. So I've been very lucky. But hello everybody. I'm good, thank you. But it was getting painful. It was getting cold sensitive, and I took some close-up pictures of it, and I would have bet anything that if I went to the dentist, they would have said I needed a root canal. I mean, I would have guaranteed it. But I like to find sort of traditional, holistic ways of healing. So I've been doing some research on teeth, remineralizing your teeth. At first, that sounded crazy, but the more I read up on it, the more interesting and legit it sounded. And so I've been doing it for about 90 days tops, and already I can tell it's working. I mean, I used to not be able to chew on it. It was too painful. Now I can chew on it. I almost forget about it. Hello, Ireland. And the sensitivity's gone. And so all I do is a big part of it is you have to have a sort of a diet change. You have to eat healthy. And to remineralize, you need lots of fats and protein, which is kind of I've been doing a keto diet, so that's kind of already there. And what the fats and the protein do is it provides the minerals you need, because most of the remineralization happens through the saliva in your mouth. The saliva just sort of fills your teeth, but apparently your teeth are designed in a way that they should be able to regrow forever. The biggest problem is keeping the mouth clean of bacteria so that it allows it to happen. The other thing I do is I gargle coconut oil in my mouth like 20 minutes a day, which is pretty gross, but you get used to it. And that does wonders. That actually cleans the tartar off. You could feel the tartar going away. So I'm the way it's gone in the past 90 days, I would be willing to bet that by the end of the year, I don't even need to worry about going to the dentist anymore. I'm starting to think that the dentist is a scam. You know, we just need to learn how to take care of our bodies more. So that's it for the public service announcements. We got some people watching now. We're going to get into it. Let me just glance at the comments here. I'm doing great. Hello, Ireland. What's new about Iran? God, I wish I knew. I don't think I've heard. I don't know if Rand Paul has gone there yet or not. They're clearly trying to start a war, Iran and the regime, and it's been frustrating because there's been, it's been so like just waiting, just like everything else. The wheels of change turn a lot slower than my ego mind would like. Okay, so let's get into it. I did prepare a little bit for today's stream. It's called New Age Minions of the Far Left. And this is a subject that I've been really wanting to make a video about, but I just didn't know where to start and where to begin because it's almost like you could make a full-length documentary on the subject. And so I just figured I would do a stream about it, and maybe that would help. Although, if any of you remember, I did a stream about Epstein for the same thing. I said I'm working on a video for Epstein, and I could use all the tips. And I just recently made that video of Jeffrey Epstein and the Dalton School connection that just focused on really just the Dalton School and a certain sort of, leftist education propaganda system that's in our country. There's just so much on the subject of Epstein. I'm just waiting for more too. But Corey Diggs just did a story that I haven't read yet that looks pretty interesting, and that could very well inspire another Epstein video. But anyways, the idea of this is to sort of get through a subject that I consider myself, I would say I'm an expert in a few things. And one of those things I think I can qualify as an expert for is religion, spiritualism, the occult, stuff like that. It's just something I've been fascinated with my whole life. And particularly in the past 15 years, some of you who have watched some of my past streams know that I spent some time in a temple at a yoga ashram. I lived there for 3 years alone, and that was an incredible experience. I've spent some time in a Tibetan Buddhist, they don't call it an ashram, monastery, I suppose, where I was building temples for a lama in Northern California mountains, the Sonoma area. And spent time in a place in Berkeley, another Tibetan Buddhism place. So I've really, what I've always found interesting is, I think I mentioned it last week, what some people might call comparative studies of different religious teachings. What I find most interesting about that is if you really open up your mind and you look at all the different teachings, what you'll find is most are all basically saying the same thing as they're at their root. And for those of us that are suspicious about lies and deceit, it would appear as if in the beginning, pretty much every traditional religion, scripture, teachings were all very positive, and they were all basically teaching a person, how to have a relationship with God and how to live their life better with more balance, very practical stuff. And then obviously this stuff, I think obviously this stuff is going to be very appealing to the masses because that's what people want. People want balance, they want guidance, they want a good life. And so the masses were drawn to the teachings no matter where you were, whether you were in Asia or Europe or Africa or wherever. And so it only makes sense that those who want to gain control and power over other people, the obvious thing to infiltrate is the religion, the local religious teachings. That's exactly what you want to usurp because it already has the trust of the people. The people already trust it. So anyways, that's what I think. I think that at the root, a lot of people are very anti-religion these days. A lot of people think that religion is evil and corrupt. And I think there's some truth to that. I think most religions have been corrupted, if not all religions have been corrupted. But that doesn't mean, and I would also argue that one of the reasons potentially as to the corruption is because they want to bring people to this thought of it's bad. They want people to throw away their religions, and they want to replace it with a new age religion. They want a one world religion. And so that's what we're going to get into right now. I have some notes that I'll be glancing at. So, why does the crazy far left get so much traction? And that's kind of what we're going to get into here. The minions. The minions we're talking about are just average, everyday, good people that have been led down the wrong path. Several paths, all leading them to the same place. And they mean well. They're good people. And there's millions of minions. So let's begin with one of my favorite writers, Robert Anton Wilson. Now, he writes quite a bit about this type of thing, but here's a great quote of his that he, kind of sums up one of the main points that Robert Anton Wilson makes in his books. If one can only see things according to one's own belief system, one is destined to become virtually deaf, dumb, and blind. And one of the things that he writes about extensively is how this mechanism in our mind works. And he offers all kinds of interesting experiments for those of us that aren't really quite aware of this part of our minds. He offers a lot of great insight and experiments to help a person, experience it themselves and then learn about how the mind works. But a lot of us already know this. And basically what it is when you believe something is true, when you put all your belief in something, then your mind will start convincing you that you're right. You could look at it in a very simple sort of, biological way almost. You could just say that your mind is a filter. And when you have a rigid belief, your mind is going to filter out everything that contradicts that belief. But it really goes deeper than that. Like some of us have what we would consider spiritual experiences, but I would argue that even our spiritual, even many, not all, but many of our so-called spiritual experiences is really just a part of our mind. And when you have a rigid belief, your mind will put you through these so-called spiritual experiences that appear to be proof. For example, when I was younger and I didn't really understand any of this stuff yet, and I had a rigid belief, I would have experiences like this and I would interpret them as if it was God telling me that I was right, that God was telling me my opinion was right. And now I would argue that it really wasn't God telling me I was right. It was my own mind. The mind is very complicated. The mind is a very mysterious, powerful thing. The Hermetic tradition of occult says that everything is mind. The physical reality is mental. And I would say that probably makes a lot of sense. So my mind would put me in these experiences, and it would feel like an epiphany, or something exotic, and I just ignored the fact that it could have been my mind, and I just said, well, that means I'm right. And I think this is a dangerous place to be. Rigid belief is not a healthy place to be, in my purview, in my opinion. Speaking of opinions, I read maybe just today or yesterday, it was in someone's profile or someone's bio, they said something like, my opinions are unchangeable. And I just thought that was kind of funny, because if your opinions are unchangeable, then you're never going to grow and you're never going to learn. That's like saying that I'm just right about everything and you can't change my mind. And that is not an uncommon thing. That's what the mind wants. The mind wants us to, the ego part of the mind, I would say the lower mind, the ego mind, is terrified of being wrong. It's terribly insecure. And it clings to the idea that it's right. Wants to be right. And so a person with the mindset of having unchangeable opinions is a person that is completely married to their belief system, completely rigidly, ignorantly tied to their opinions and their ego, and it renders them deaf, dumb, and blind to, you could say what God is trying to show you. I mean, I would argue that we're all here to learn and grow and experience. And it's now it's to the point where it's strange to me. Now it's so liberating to be wrong. I've been wrong about many, if not most things throughout my years in this life. And it's gotten to the point now where when I find that I'm wrong about something, it's an incredible experience. It's like it makes you feel like you're a child again. And it reminds you how little we know and how much mystery there is in the world. So we'll get back to this near again in the end, but that's how we want to start. We want to start with this aspect of our mind that can be, we can lie to ourselves. We can fool ourselves. We can put blinders on with our own belief system. So to begin, of the New Age minions, the first group of New Age minions that we're going to talk about in a word is yoga. And this is one of the main reasons why I've been wanting to do this story or a report on this, and now it's a live stream. It's because I'm very personally connected to yoga. And I'm first going to say, yoga has changed my life. Yoga is a Sanskrit word, and it basically means to yoke or to connect, to bind. Very similar to the meaning of the word religion, to connect to God. That's really what it's all about. It's the skills, and yoga has very practical skill set. It is simply, well, we'll get to that in a second. So yoga was, technically, it's historically written that it was first introduced to the West, at least in America, in 1893 when Swami Vivekananda went to the Chicago Fair and introduced Raja Yoga, or Raha Yoga. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it. Now, there are many schools of yoga. Yoga's become very popular. If you want to copyright your own yoga, then you got to kind of make up your own yoga. So that's branched off and it's created a whole industry out of it. But I would argue that Raja Yoga is all you really need if you want to study yoga. And when you study Raja Yoga on your own, you really understand that there is no dispute. It's not a religion. It's not like some people compare yoga to, Christianity or other things. And you can't, I understand why, and we're going to get into that because it's sort of become a religion in the West, at least. I can't speak for how it is. I think it's probably the same way in the East because the East has become completely westernized with it. But if you're to take Raja Yoga is basically based off of the Yoga Sutras, which is an ancient scripture. Some people said it was written 8,000 years ago. Some people said it was written 3,000 years ago. We don't really know when it was written. But it was written allegedly by a guy named Patanjali. And there are hundreds of books out there that translate the Yoga Sutras into English and give commentary. And the Yoga Sutras are brilliant. I highly recommend anyone who wants to learn about themselves, anyone who wants to learn about the body and the mind, the Yoga Sutras is a very straightforward, practical guide as to how to experience things and how to, analyze the self, and learn about how you work. One of the greatest values of Raja Yoga is learning things like I was just talking about how the mind, will react to rigid beliefs. It's invaluable. And I would even argue that I think if people were raised with these skills, if people were raised learning how to meditate, learning how to observe the mind from like a third party sort of perspective, objectively, if people had these skills, it would be very difficult to fool us. It would be very difficult to deceive us, and it would be very difficult to lie to us. It would make us skeptical in a very healthy way. That's what it's done for me, and I think that's what it's done for, I would argue that's what it's done for most people that approach it in the right way. The problems came when, in my opinion, with the idea of a guru-disciple relationship. That is what it seems introduced the evil, the corruption into the entire school of yoga. When I first went to the ashram, before I went, I didn't know anything about, I just knew yoga with the body. It's also very good. It keeps you very healthy. Not just, stretching, which is good, but it also actually, a lot of the exercises are designed to help exercise the endocrine system. So it keeps you hormonally healthy and balanced. Very common. I've met several women in yoga throughout the years that had thyroid issues and hormone issues, and they were able to remedy it with basic yoga. So I knew that, and I was into meditation. I was studying some Buddhism, and I wanted to experience more. And so a friend of mine was telling me about this yoga ashram that he went to. And my issue was with the guru. I just seemed weird and unhealthy to me to have a human being that is elevated to, that level of power. I'm very grateful to God that I think I kind of always grew up that way, being highly suspicious of people in general. So I told him that, and then he gave me a pamphlet, and the pamphlet was basically the guru-disciple relationship. And what the pamphlet said was that the true guru is inside of you, and the purpose of having a physical guru is to sort of help you learn that lesson. And I bought that. I thought, okay, well, that makes sense. The true guru inside of you is not God. That's another common misconception in the New Age world, that we are God and that God is this thing inside of us. And I would argue that's very dangerous too. I would say the guru inside of you would be your higher mind, your higher self, your soul, your spirit, whatever you want to call it. And that aspect of us is connected to God. That aspect of us is directly connected to God, and that is how we can actually commune and connect to God. But that's a whole other process too. And when you really practice the yoga and you understand that you have like a higher mind that's connected to God and a lower mind that you could argue is connected to Satan, and you have this constant battle within you between these two parts of your own mind, once you kind of recognize that, you become a little cautious, and you realize that you had better learn the difference between these aspects of the self before you go about thinking that you're following God's path or you're following the right path. It's anyone who doesn't realize that they can lie to themselves and that they can be fooled by their own mind is a person who is ripe for being lied to and deceived by their own mind. And the people that control us know this, and they use it against us. That's why we don't have this common knowledge. That's why we don't grow up learning how to meditate, learning about ourselves, because the fallen ones, or whatever you want to call them, know this, and they want to keep us in a state of ignorance. They want to keep us ripe for the picking. And I would even say that God is in control of everything, including the fallen ones. It's all God, and this is part of God's plan. God wants us to pull ourselves out of this mess on our own. And by doing so, it transforms us. So let's take a look at some yoga gurus throughout the history. And they really made it, probably starting in the 60s, in America at least, is really when it started coming here, the whole guru yoga scene. Well, let's start with this. Here are some yoga stats that I pulled up. Some of you might not be into yoga and you might not know many people that are, but it's extremely popular. 36 million Americans practice yoga. There's thought to be 300 million worldwide. Between 2012 and 2016, this number doubled. Or not doubled, it grew by 50%. Sorry. Approximately 1 in 3 Americans have tried yoga. And so it's extremely popular. Americans spend $16 billion on yoga classes each year. There's currently 6,000 yoga studios in the U.S. I would guess that most people know someone who's into yoga. I mean, or at least understands how extremely popular it is here in America. And if it was done right, I would say that's a great thing. I would say we're all better off for it. But something happened, and I would argue it was the guru-disciple paradigm that did it, which is a simple way to corrupt it, because I think most reasonably intelligent people understand how easily we are corrupted, all of us. So all I got to do is put one of us in charge and give us too much power, and things are going to go bad. So let's take a look. And this is just a smidgen. You could find more than these. This is Bikram Choudhury, the founder of Bikram Yoga. Now, Bikram Yoga itself is fantastic. I would say it's probably one of the most physically beneficial practices I've found, and it's extremely pleasurable to do. After a good, solid 90 minutes of Bikram Yoga, you're going to feel fantastic, and it's healed my body. But the founder is a complete douchebag. He's been accused of sexual harassment, assault, and rape. He allegedly just stole a sort of Brahmin class secret teaching of yoga, the good stuff, and capitalized in it in America. I'm probably going to get some of these names wrong as far as pronunciations. Dr. Katsub Desikachar, founder of the Krishnamacharya Yoga Foundation, accused of sexual abuse. John Friend, he's an American. He's the founder of Anusara Yoga, accused of leading a Wiccan coven and having affairs with his married students. K. Patabi Joyce, guru of Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga, also a great practice, accused of sexual assault. This is the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the one who the Beatles hung out with, came here in the 60s, the leader of Transcendental Meditation movement. He's accused of rape. And there is I believe it's a Jamie Deluxe video that gets into his relationship with George Harrison, and how gets into how him and George Harrison were into kids, and they would go on trips together for that. Not in a good way. Manoso Manos, Iyengar Yoga, accused of sexual assault. Osel Tenzin, who knowingly had AIDS and induced his students to have unprotected sex with him. Apparently, he gave several of his students AIDS knowingly. Osho, many know Osho, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. He is in the movie Wild Wild Country on Netflix, the documentary, very good documentary. Fraud, prostitution, and drug running. And his group was actually drugging the retired Christian community next door to them because they just didn't like him, or God knows why. Swami Akhandananda Saraswati, the leader of the Mangrove Ashram, charged with 35 counts of child sexual abuse. Swami Kriyananda, the founder of Ananda Sangha, accused of sexual abuse. Swami Maheshwarananda, founder of Yoga in Daily Life, accused of sexual assault. Swami Muktananda, founder of the Siddha, accused of having sex with underage girls. Swami Rama, founder of the Himalayan Institute, accused of sexual abuse and rape. Swami Satya Sai Baba, he had like 50 million followers and was referred to as God on Earth. He also hung out with George Bush, accused of sexually abusing several boys and also accused of murder. Swami Shankarananda, the leader of the Mount Eliza Ashram, accused of sexual abuse. And back to Bikram. Now, I purposely left out a few. There are several that are accused of having consensual sex with their followers. And pretty much most of these gurus claim to be celibate. Anyone wearing orange is a monk who's taken a vow of celibacy. And I left out the ones that had consensual sex. I mean, because, you know, what two adults do is fine. And some people could argue that it's an abuse of power. It is an abuse of power. I'm sure it is. But the point I'm driving home is that there's been a consistent, just like the Catholic Church, just like we see in government, just like we see in politics, you put a person in that much power and protect them in a way, then things could get really ugly. Now, what does this do? What does this do? Well, let's think about it. So this kind of came over here in the 1960s during the wild American culture experiment. I used to feel like I was born too late. I thought the 60s would have been really righteous and cool. What's interesting is if you look into the Laurel Canyon stories, it appears as if the 60s was heavily contrived. Some type of culture bomb to really sort of destroy the Western Christian culture. And I would say a big part of this is these yoga gurus. Excuse me. Because the 60s was introducing all kinds of counterculture that was somewhat contrary to living a clean Christian life. And not everyone understands the values of a clean Christian life until you get older. And that's the whole purpose. The whole purpose is to kind of help a young mind out until they get to a point of self-discipline. I can speak for myself. I'm not being judgy. I grew up very promiscuous. I did about as many drugs as I could get my hands on. I've done just about everything. I was a bit of a party animal, a bit of a wild child, and I have no regrets, but it has affected me. It has, it brought a lot of darkness, that I've since, outlived and outgrown. It's all in the past, but brought lots of darkness in, and while it taught me lessons, it could have been avoided. But the modern pop culture sort of puts this thing in people's heads that that living a clean, balanced, healthy life is sort of depriving yourself of the better things, which is it's exactly the opposite. And so around the same time that the counterculture was being introduced, these gurus came in and offered, I think I would argue that everyone, it's in our innate hearts that we want God. Whether we admit it or not, I think all of us are the same like that. And so you have these kids that they don't want the Christian God. They don't want the God of their parents because they've been sort of sold this idea that their parents are squares and repressive and oppressive, but they still want God. And so they get it in their guru. They get it in these gurus that come over here. And then you sell them this idea that the guru is God, which is exactly what is the belief. It's a big problem. When I was at the, here's the story. When I was at the yoga ashram, and I was never okay with it. I read that pamphlet, like I said, and it made me comfortable enough to go. And while I was there, I really spent most of my time alone practicing yoga by myself with God. And it was great. It was life-changing. It did it for me. And I was able to do that the whole time with Christ in my heart. I felt that it was God that led me there and was basically, by my side while I was learning about my mind. Which is why I say that yoga in itself is not a religion or a belief system. It's just a modality. It's a school of learning about the body and the mind that applies to every human being. We all have we share the same mind, some people say. And that seems very reasonable. But I always had a problem with the whole idea of seeing a guru as something other than just a man or a woman. I've always thought it's very dangerous to put any individual into a higher rank than just another man or woman. But that's not the common belief. And I don't know exactly where it came from. I think it came from this weird ideology of the guru-disciple relationship that really isn't in yoga. I mentioned earlier the Yoga Sutras, which is really what Raja Yoga all is. And it will talk about the guru inside of you, the higher mind. It might use that word guru to describe the soul within you, but there's nothing in the sutras that talks about finding another living person and worshiping him. But that's the way it is now. If you know someone who's into yoga and you ask them about a guru, chances are they'll be fine with it. And so when I was there, occasionally a swami would come. And occasionally a swami would come that was believed to be fully realized, which is like a term that people use, and I don't even know what the hell they're talking about. But there is, in the culture, in the yoga culture, there are people that believe that a person can become fully realized. And I've spent years wondering what the hell that means. What is that enlightenment, right? And I've given up asking the question because I've come to believe that it's just bullshit. I think the best we can get in life is balance and a connection to God. I don't know what this enlightenment is, but a lot of people believe it. And so I would fight that, and I would have several discussions with people that were willing to discuss it. A lot of people weren't willing to discuss it, just like we were talking about with old Robert Anton Wilson here. If a person has a rigid belief system, they're not going to hear any, alternative possibilities. They're going to be blind to everything else other than a reality. And so there was this one time this guy came, and he was a young guy, very large. He was almost 7 feet tall, probably 300 pounds, very big guy, young. And he ate it up. He knew that people thought he was a fully realized soul, and so he played the role. He walked around like a godly guru, allowed everyone to put flowers at his feet and stuff like that. And I found it very disturbing. But I have an open mind. I try to have an open mind. I try to stay open. I think it's a very healthy place to be. So I went to his talk, and there was a young girl who was not a resident. She was there are people that come to the ashram just for a week or 2 weeks or a month, stuff like that, to kind of check it out and learn. She was a young girl, very small. I mean, it was almost the ultimate comparison. You have this 7-foot giant and this, she was probably 5 foot, petite, young, probably 19, 20. And she got up and she asked him a question, and it was a very valid question. I think she kind of was questioning his whole realized thing. Okay, I do remember. He was preaching about that it's egotistical to say I. like I'm doing this, I'm reading notes, blah, blah, blah. And she didn't say it rudely. I mean, and to be honest, she said it was a very valid question because he was using the word I, and that's a contradiction. So she was just asking him about that innocently. And he made her cry. He started making fun of her. And then when she started crying, then he was making fun of her for crying. And it was hard not to kind of make a scene, but it was at the ashram. Everyone knew what they were getting into to a certain extent. So, but a few of us were very upset about it, and we talked, and a few of us were making a big fuss about it for a while. And what was even worse was the reaction. The believers were arguing that it was God. It wasn't him making this girl cry. It was because he self-realized, because he's God incarnate. It was actually God giving this little girl exactly what she needed, that she needed to be embarrassed and humiliated. That was the really scary thing. And that wasn't just a few people. That was easily the majority of the people there were of that mindset. And I mean, that is dangerous. I think for anyone to think that any human being is God is above being questioned or anything they do is excusable because it's God working through them. That's how you can have, and that's what happens with all these, all these characters that we talked about. These people were able to continue, raping and molesting because their devotees defended them. They were surrounded by brainwashed cult members that would defend all of their rotten actions because they believed that they were God incarnate, and they would just believe that this is what God wants. And this is crazy. It's crazy. So, I mean, and that's millions of people. Now, not everyone. I mean, I met, like I said, I've been in that world for quite a few years. For a while, for 3 years, pretty much all my friends were yoga people. Not everyone's like that. So you meet people that think, I mean, this is just my opinion, but I would say level-headed like I was thinking. The yoga practice is great for the mind and the body, but it's an individual practice. It should only involve you and God. Once you bring in some type of guru who's supposed to be God, then it becomes extremely creepy and dangerous and bad. You do meet people that agree with that. Some of your friends that are into yoga might agree with that too. But the scary thing is in my experience, the majority of the people that are into yoga just accept this whole idea of the guru thing. I don't get it. I don't know why that's appealing to people or why that's attractive to people. Well, you know what? I think I do. I think our ego, our lower mind, wants that. Our lower mind ego wants to be God. It wants to be the Savior. It wants to be the Messiah. It wants to be adored and worshipped, not just by us, but by everyone. And so if a person doesn't have an understanding of the power of the ego, then they're going to be enslaved by the ego. And that's a guarantee. If a person is not aware of the power of their lower mind and their ego, then they are going to be led by a leash, led on a leash by their lower mind and their ego. Guaranteed, 100%. And this is why it's so important to know thyself, to understand, how our mind works. So that's yoga. Next, we're going to get into New Age. This is the Lucis Trust. And the original name of the Lucis Trust was the Lucifer Trust. They claimed it was because Lucifer means the light, and this is about truth and the light. You hear a lot of people talk about the light in the New Age world. In the yoga world too, love and light, love and light. I got nothing against light, but this is basically where that stemmed from, was Lucifer. They changed the name to the Lucis Trust because, calling it the Lucifer Trust brought a lot of bad press. And the Lucis Trust is based on the teachings of Alice Ann Bailey. And I'm not exactly sure if we can credit her with finding the Lucis Trust. The Lucis Trust is really just to keep her work intact. And you can go all over the place. In a lot of respects, her writings were based on Madame Blavatsky, who was, fairly very open, anti-Christian occultist. Excuse me, Aleister Crowley stuff. Alice Bailey is sort of the, sort of a wolf in sheep's clothing version of that. And there are schools of the Lucis Trust all over the world. When I lived in New Zealand, I visited a monastery or something like that was based on the Lucis Trust, run by a married Australian couple. And the Lucis Trust, just a little bit of an investigation, you'll find that Alice Bailey had this 10-point strategy. Here it's called of New World Order. I doubt that that's what she called it, but she may have. But let's just take a look at this. And this is legitimately her plan. 1, take God and prayer out of education system. 2, reduce parental authority over children. 3, destroy the traditional Christian family structure. 4, if sex is free, make abortion legal and easy. 5, make divorce easy and legal, free people from the concept of marriage for life. 6, make homosexuality an alternative lifestyle. 7, debase art, make it run mad. 8, use media to promote and change mindset. 9, create an interfaith movement. 10, get governments to make all these laws and get the church to endorse these teachings. And those have all basically happened. I mean, let's look at them. Has anything not happened on there? No. And that's rather interesting. And that is, the Lucis Trust is bigger than, you might have heard of it, you might not have heard it, but it is not a little thing. It's very widespread. It's perfectly acceptable. You'll find her books in all the bookstores. And her books are fairly, I wouldn't argue that her books are in themselves evil or corrupt. In a lot of ways, even Madame Blavatsky, even Aleister Crowley, they all touch on the same truths. They all touch on the same basic truths. I would say where they all fall short is having the humility and the surrender to God and understanding. A friend of mine, when I was having a conversation like this, said if a person doesn't understand the relationship between the lower mind and the higher mind, then they cannot trust their own feelings, they cannot trust their own intuition, and they need Scripture. They need Christian Scripture, Holy Scripture to guide them, to keep them on the right path. And then once you can gain that self-knowledge, then you can actually start having a direct personal relationship. But that requires humility and that requires surrender. That requires maybe not physically getting on your knees, but mentally, emotionally, figuratively getting on your knees, realizing that you don't know anything, humbling yourself. I don't know. I'm lost. Help me. And then learning to hear or receive guidance from that higher mind, from that spirit. It's not as... I feel like I'm on a good path with that now, but only in the past couple of years. And for 10, 15 years, that was my biggest gripe, was I'm not able to hear my higher mind. My lower mind is so loud, you can't hear through it. But that's the first step. First step is to at least recognize the lower mind so you can at least learn to ignore it. And then the second step is to turn it off and to try to shut it down. Although it's not all bad. I mean, the lower mind does have important aspects to it. I mean, we were given everything we need. We just have to learn how to operate with it. All right, so next, let's look at sort of pop culture-y New Age. Abraham Hicks. Her name is Esther Hicks. Teachings of Abraham. Esther Hicks and her husband were studying the occult, and she started channeling this spirit who told her his name was Abraham. And her husband have made quite the living going all over the world, charging people money to come to these seminars where they ask Abraham, Esther, a question about their life, and this Esther Hicks character will answer them. And it really all has to do with what we know as the law of attraction. Her answers are all basically the same. This is Bashar, who is sort of a wacky Los Angeles version of Abraham Hicks. Bashar claims to channel an alien who is in orbit around our planet, who is all-knowing. And Bashar also basically preaches the law of attraction. This is the movie The Secret. Many of you might know this movie. It was extremely hyped up somewhere around, I believe, 2008, 2009-ish, 2007, something like that. All about the law of attraction. I would argue, I'm a suspicious person, and I tend to realize that we're all capable of deceit. I would argue that this character and this character are simply making a living off of their basic understanding of the law of attraction. Now, is the law of attraction a real thing? I would say yes, it is. And that's why they've been so successful, because something inside of us knows that there is an element of truth to it. It's really quite simple. It's the thought comes before the reality, and that's how everything is. It's as simple and fundamental as, say you want to learn an instrument. The first thing you do is you think about wanting to learn an instrument, then you got to pick it up, then you got to practice, and you got to go through this thing, and eventually you manifest a skill of playing an instrument. It could be even more magical. If you think about something over and over again, then chances are you're going to, find that thing coming into your life. Some people could argue it's just simply your mind filtering it because you're thinking about it, and there could be some truth to that. But I know I've experienced several things in my life where it seems a little more mysterious and unexplainable. I myself was very caught up in, at least when this came out, I thought this movie was great. I enjoyed Abraham Hicks probably for at least a year in my life, watching her clips. This guy here I enjoyed mostly as an entertainment value because he's a bit of a weirdo. It's funny. But ultimately, I was very interested in the law of attraction. And it's extremely appealing to many people. I would say anyone who's sort of lost and looking for something, it has a very strong appeal, because basically what it teaches is that you can have anything you want. You just have to think about it. That's where I was always suspicious. And here's what I think now about that. I think the truth on that is simply, this is a whole other discussion. This is just what I tend to think is what we're experiencing. I believe in the soul. I could be wrong, but I believe in the soul. I believe the soul is connected to God. I believe we are here to have experiences. We are here to evolve. We are here to learn. And we are here for specific purposes. We are here, we are almost born with like an itinerary of experiences that we are going to have, that we came here specifically to have, so that we could have these experiences to learn and to grow and evolve. That's just what I think. And so you cannot deviate from that itinerary. This is where the law of attraction falls short. You know, for example, if your purpose in life, you know, is to have these specific experiences or whatever, then you can practice the law of attraction in the sense of surrendering to God, surrendering, letting go, allowing things to happen, go with the flow. That's going to be the easiest course to quickly get you along your path so that you can have these experiences and learn. Or you can resist. You can resist your path and it'll make your life miserable, and you'll still probably end up on the same path. You'll just get there the hard way and maybe waste a lot of time in your life. And you could probably waste your whole life by resisting. So that's just how I feel. I think there is truth to the law of attraction. You can speed up and make your intended path a little more smooth and efficient by opening your heart up to these things. But I'm at the point now where I think the idea of you can just have anything you want by thinking about it is not just total nonsense, but it's a dangerous lie, and it traps people into this new age thing. So, to wrap it up, why is it called New Age? We've been talking about the New Age, but why are they minions of the left? Well, the guru-disciple thing is preparing them all to sort of accept humans in a godlike view, accept that authoritarianism. It cuts them off of a true relationship with God, which leaves them easy pickings for manipulation and lies, keeps them ignorant, keeps them blind and deaf in their rigid belief system that they're taught. And specifically, you'll find in the yoga community, in the law of attraction community, in the Lucius Trust, in the occult, you will find this idea of the mother goddess, the feminine, ruling over the new age. And it's surprising to me that people don't see through this, because if you really study, that's the other beauty of looking at all different religions, to find commonalities. And one of the commonalities you're going to find is that God is not male or female. God is beyond that. And this is why man and woman create a child, because true spiritual nature is both male and female. It has, and it's not really male or female. Male or female is strictly a physical, biological thing. However, it's like I can't think of the word when you put animal characteristics onto things to understand them better. I mean, we're simple creatures, and so to understand certain aspects of God and reality and nature, we'll put male characteristics and female characteristics, because for those of us that aren't brainwashed by the radical left, we understand that there are male characteristics and female characteristics. There's masculinity, there's femininity. We all have both, to varying degrees. But this idea of the mother goddess and that the new age is going to be women ruling because women are somehow better. And I don't understand that, but this is extremely popular in the world today. In the yoga community, it's extremely popular. Anyone who knows people that are really into yoga probably knows, they have a lot of talk about this, about the mother goddess. Mother goddess is very cultish. It's very Luciferian. It's very satanic. Doesn't mean that, and I would say it's not because women are evil. It's because it would be the same if you said that the future is male and that men are going to rule over. It's the same thing. You're separating, you're dividing, you're conquering. It's the separation of the divine unity of male, female, pulling that apart, dividing us, and people buy it. People legit buy it. There are millions of these new age minions among us, in our families, our friends, who think that this new utopian world is right around the corner and it's going to be women ruling everything. And what effect does that have? It means that while the radical left is out there saying that men are the problem, all these new age minions just accept that. Now, obviously, there's cognitive dissonance. Obviously, if they think it's going to be some sort of utopian, perfect, loving, kind world of love and light, there's got to be a part of them that sees the misogynistic, sort of man-hating quality of that, but they'll just dismiss that because the ego mind wants, it doesn't want suffering, but suffering is often what we need to learn and evolve and grow. Without suffering, there is no growth. This idea of a utopian world where nobody suffers is a meaningless world where nobody grows and nobody evolves. But this is the lie that these minions have been sold on. They've been sold on this idea that nature is evil, or the natural world as it is, rather than adapting and accepting and learning the natural world, which is what we're talking about. When you observe your own mind, when you observe your own thoughts, that's an acceptance. That's what I would call love. That's taking this natural force that's a mystery to you and that's more powerful than you, and instead of trying to force it to your will, you study it and you learn it and you adapt to it and you learn how to find balance. And so that's why these minions are there to let this happen. That's why the new age minions, these peace, love, hippie, yogi people, are okay with thinking that we're like these racist Nazis and that men are bad, just because they've been sold this idea that the new age is coming and it's going to be run by women. And I don't know what role they think men are going to have. I don't know if they've thought it all through. I think it's just simply damaged, mentally ill people. And I mean that, to be fair, we're all damaged and mentally ill. If you're not damaged and mentally ill, then you're probably a few months old. I mean, that's what life is. Life is you get damaged, you get mentally ill, and then you either grow and learn and get over your mental illness and become a balanced individual, or you just live your life mentally ill, adding to the misery of everyone else, and on and on and on. So that's basically it. I hope I got my point across. I hope that this was somewhat entertaining. If any of this is interesting to you, I wrote a book about my experience with yoga and the positive effects it had on me. And this book basically contains all the different yoga practices, and they're all from the Yoga Sutras, like I mentioned, the foundation of yoga. Very simple practices. And if you already have a relationship with God, then all you got to do is get on your knees to God, and God will tell you the same stuff. But if you're into reading, or if you like audiobooks, if you like my voice, if you like my music, you can check this book out. And so that's basically today's today's thing. I'm going to glance at the comments really quick. All right, so someone wrote, women who could be real rulers are the best at being mothers and wives and have no time to be president. Now, see, I think this is a no-brainer. And one of the problems is that I would say, I don't know how it happened. I guess it was probably modern feminism sold this idea that there is some type of inferiority or weakness in being a mother, but that's the only reason that anyone buys that is because they're mentally ill, like I said, and that's not a dig. I think you're not living your life if you don't experience mental illness, but obviously the most important, valuable part of a society is the mother. You know, if a child grows up without a loving mother, the child's going to be more mentally ill than the average person. And isn't it a better job anyways? Like, than leading people or any position of quote unquote power. I mean, raising children, you know, making a good home. How is that not far superior to any other job? Most men jobs are dirty, hard jobs that are just more like worker bee stuff, right? So it's really a perfect divine deal. You know, nature has got it all figured out. So it's my opinion, and I like to keep open about things, but it's of my opinion that the true purpose in life, or the true path to sort of a collective balance, is to surrender to nature, surrender to God, not try to fight it, try to change it, try to come up with your own thing. Yeah, so that's that. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're having a good Friday night. And I love you. I wish you the best. Let's all, you know, we're living in a crazy time. I'll tell you what. The recent attempt on Jeffrey Epstein's life. I mean, it's just, to me, it's hard to believe that so much could be dependent on one person. And that's probably just my own fear. I mean, if I were, really, in the end, we just have to trust God. We're going to get God's will, whether we like it or not. And so go with the flow, go with God, enjoy life, and have a great night. I love you all. Signing off. See you next time. Sayonara.